Hi and welcome back. Today I've got a pretty cool item to look at. Devon Custom Rifles in the UK have sent me out their brand new trigger, which is the DCR Hybrid trigger. You can see it here mounted to my barreled action. Just to show you guys, it's upside down, but it still works fine. It's a fairly standard looking trigger, no fancy parts on it. It looks pretty much like a standard Remy. But as soon as you get a close look, you can see the quality. It's all machine made, there's no pressed parts. Everything in it is 304 stainless steel. That's a stainless steel that's used in applications that require higher resistance to corrosion, like tankers, vats, some like pool equipment, stuff that needs to be reliably solid and going to keep its shape, not pit, not rust. So that's what this stuff is, and I think it's a great choice to use it for a trigger. There are harder stainless steels out there. Joule are one of the companies who make trigger units out of slightly harder internals. They use 440 stainless steel. That's normally used in things like sealed bearings, roller bearings, certain knife blades, hard materials like that. It's not as good at corrosion resistant just because the 440 is higher carbon and it just not as resistant to pitting. So I think it's a great trade-off. It's strong, but it's still able to take care of itself under harsh conditions, salty water, and that gets in there. So that's the whole body, everything from the trigger blade itself, which is the 304 stainless. It's bead blasted to give it a nice little grip. It's not slippy. What I do like about this trigger straight away when I seen it is it's swept back. This is the Next Mark Pro that was in one of my other rifles, one of the recalls. And as you can see, when I line it up, the trigger blade is a good ½ inch forward. It's just too far out for my small fingers. It's no good. And you can see my own Timney tactical here. It's currently set up to my proper finger width. And if I line it up, you can see the blades are pretty much exactly where they are. So straight out of the box, it fits my finger perfectly. And DCR have also said that in the future they'll be looking down the route of making different trigger blades and different finishes as well if you wish. So if you wanted a straight bar, more of a hook, maybe even a wider shoe, that's all something they can accommodate you with down in the future. This being a hybrid trigger, it can be used for multiple stuff. It does go as low as 2 ounces, so it could be used as a bench rest, and it goes up to 6. It does have the bolt release and it does have full safety. Now safety is a sear engage safety, so once the safety's on, it disconnects the trigger from the equation. No matter what happens to the trigger, if it gets caught in something, got a bit of bush, something happens, you pull it by accident, it does not affect the firing mechanism whatsoever anymore. It's disconnected while the safety is on, which is a great way to have it. All the new Remy's are like that. A lot of triggers have gone that way instead of using a blade safety that would lock the blade in position. This is an easier way because there's nothing to foul up. It's a better safety all around. So put the safety back off again. You get a lovely clean trigger pull like that. That one at the moment is set to 3 ounces. That's the way it came from the factory. But what I really like about this trigger is its design. Now, the way a trigger works, for the people who don't know, is you pull a trigger and all it does is it moves a bar that gets from a disconnect, this drops down and your bolt fires forward. That's all it is. So you pull a trigger, it moves a bar out of the way, this fires forwards. This trigger is built almost upside down compared to any triggers I have in-house. The Timney and the Remy both have their sears up near the top. This little black pointer here. So you can see the sear in the Remy is up here. So the trigger blade comes up and there's a big bar, it comes all the way up to here and it connects with the surface here on the top. So when you pull the trigger, it drops out and this surface drops and your bolt will fire. That means that it's almost 50-50 with the pivot point being here. The amount of pressure you put up here is directly transferred up here. The Timney Tactical is almost the same, but they've gone with an even closer sear. So you pull the trigger, pivot points down here. the sear is here. There's another little connector in between the sear and the top plate, so the sear can be dropped down so that it's not one-to-one. The amount of pressure you put here is not the same amount of pressure that happens on the sear, so you can have a lighter weight trigger and still have a decent amount of sear engagement. This one is gone to the next extreme. It's brought it much farther down. Not really sure if you can see from this side. I'm going to get a camera here and rotate it around so you can see. But if I'll point where it actually is. The sear is just behind this bolt release here, and which means that it's about 5 millimeters or quarter of an inch from the pivot point on the trigger blade, which means you have loads of control and loads of force that you can put on that sear surface without actually feeling it in your trigger finger, just because of the law of the lever. What this means for shooters is that you can have a good solid sear engagement and still have a really light trigger pull. Let's face it, you can get just about any trigger down to half a pound of pressure, but to do it safely, that's a whole other issue. That's where the whole Remington thing happened years and years ago, where there was the recall on the originals and the recall on the new X-Mark Pros. This fixes that problem. This gives you the ability to have a lot of sear contact and tough sear contact, where it's pushing good and hard. It's not going to bounce. And because you have all that lever to work with from the pivot point here, you can move that without noticing how much pressure there is. If you have a one-to-one lever, you're exactly in the middle, how much pressure is on here is directly transferred up to your fingertip. But this way, you're going to feel a fraction of the pressure that it takes to disconnect that sear. So the design is really good. Now, another company that picked up on this a while back again is currently, I think all the PRS matches, a lot of the winners last year in those type of series in the precision rifle were the dual triggers. I know they do two different types. They do the bench rest, which is more like this with no bolt release, no safety, and I think that goes down to 2 ounces. This one also goes to 2 ounces. You do have your bolt release, you do have your safety. It goes to 6 ounces as well on the other end. But the two of them use this sear technology just really close to the pivot point, so you can have as safe as possible a trigger pull without having to compromise on the trigger weight, which it really is the way forwards. And it's just every better trigger that came out was moving the sear point closer and closer to the pivot until they get to this point here where it's almost perfect, or as perfect as it can currently get, while still being safe. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to give you a view from this side here. We'll be able to see the sear in action and how much engagement there currently is in it. There we go. So in there, we can see the sear. You can see, as we move the trigger there, you can see them rubbing off each other. And there's very little pressure on my finger. As I said, it is 3 ounces. So all I got to do is pull it right past the break point, and it fires. It's very, very simple and very, very well engineered to be very safe but very light. Now, as you can see there's quite a bit of sear engagement, but that's easily changed if you want to do it yourself. This comes with the standard 3 adjustment points. We have the one on the back here is your pressure, and as I said, this goes from 6 to 2 ounces. It comes around 3 ounces from the box. This one is exactly 3 at the moment. Underneath the bolt release here, you have your sear surface engagement adjustment screw. And if you want a hair trigger, you can bring that sear surface down. That is something that you could do yourself. But if you take too much sear off that, no matter what type of trigger it is, you can get an unsafe condition. That's something you don't want. What I do is I keep working the sear in to reduce it until it fails. And how I make it fail is I'll get it to the point, I'll lock it all up, I'll get a hammer, a little plastic hammer, I'll hit the action and hit the bolt. If the process of me hitting the bolt and the action makes the trigger release, then I know it's an unsafe condition. I'll add a little bit more sear contact, and I'll do the same thing until I get a completely safe sear engagement, and I know that under no accidental circumstances is that trigger going to fire. Unless you pull the blade, it's not going to go off. And that's the way I do it. There's a million different ways of doing it. You can get your smith to get you the best sear contact you want, or if you're handy, you can do it yourself. And the last one here is the sear, or the trigger over travel, which from factory is set almost perfectly. It almost it doesn't need to be touched for a factory. Well, this particular one anyway, but it's there if you do need to change it. The two main adjustments can be got to while the trigger is mounted in the rifle, and the rifle's all put together, assuming you can get an Allen key up inside your trigger well, which a lot of trigger wells will let you do. You do need a ball end Allen key. The straight ones won't fit down in it. There's too much of an angle, but the ones with a little ball in the end will do no problem. So that's pretty much the build of the trigger itself. But now with it a good bit, it took a little bit to get used to, but now I really do like it. But the only reason that it took me a while to get the hang of it was my Timney is set to a tiny amount of sear surface, because with the distance between the sear and the pivot point being so long, the only way I can reduce the pressure on my Timney was to reduce sear surface, instead of once all the pressure from the spring is released, sear is all you've left that you can adjust. So it's as safe as it can be right now, and I think it's sitting somewhere between 8 and 12 ounces. It won't go any lower safely. The build of the trigger itself is beautiful. The whole thing is machined. There's no pressed metal. It's stainless steel screws. It's stainless steel rods and circlips. Everything is put together really, really nice. And there's no finish on it. It's just the natural stainless steel with the DCR engraving on the side. So there's nothing to wear off. And it is that very resistant stainless steel, so it's not going to wear itself down. Now, like every product I get, I like to try and find what's wrong with them. I found it hard to find anything wrong with this one, just because they must have spent a long time developing it. The one problem I did find is if you are adjusting your sear engagement, you will have a tough time getting an Allen key in there with the bolt release blocking the way. At the moment, the only way I could get at it was drop out the pivot bolt and swing the bolt release forwards to get into it. But this is a thing that you won't have to adjust very often, and once it's in there, it's Loctited. It's not going to go anywhere. I've told DCR about this. They're aware of it, and they're going to work on it. Other than that, even the reset spring, I've never seen this before. The reset spring inside here has a little copper bushing on it, so that the stainless steel won't wear down the steel spring, because it is harder than it. The little bushing, I guess it stops rattling, but it also helps giving a complete contact all the time, and it's not going to wear out the spring in any way. It helps the spring. It's little details like that that makes this a very nice trigger indeed. So over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I have a couple of matches coming up. Hopefully I'll be able to make them. I'll be using this trigger the whole time, and it's going to take a little bit to get used to it, as I said, because I was so used to a shorter trigger pull. I'm going to reduce the sear in this a little bit to where it's safe and still functional, and we'll see how it goes in competition. But I know for a fact I like it way more than this. A couple of days ago, I was practicing one of my friend's rifles. He has one of those nice jewels in there, and it's very, very similar in feel. Now, he had his set to a very small amount of sear engagement, and I'm sure this can get to the same amount. It's just I haven't played with it enough. But these things will be retailing somewhere around the £240 range. Now, everything's subject to change because these aren't even really out yet, but you'd be looking somewhere inside that range. That's to me, that's a great price. To get my Timney, I was looking at £200, and as well as it being not as good quality a trigger, it doesn't have all the features. We don't have a bolt stop. We don't have the we don't have a safety. We don't have a bolt release. This has everything for that price. So we'll see once they come out with the final form of this trigger, which shouldn't be too long now. We'll see what it's like. But if you'd like to get in contact with Devon Custom Rifles and find out more about their DCR hybrid trigger, I'll leave a link in the details below, and you can get onto them down there. They're also on Facebook. They're very fast to respond, and a very nice bunch of guys and girls. So for now, I'll see you guys next time.